So a new focus today on averting the fiscal or the next fiscal crisis, which is preventing a government shutdown at the end of the month. And new signs that both sides are willing to compromise. This week, the House will vote on a spending measure that would keep the government from shutting down. Funding will expire. We run out of cash again on March the 27th. Joining me now, Congressman Tom Cole, who's a Republican from Oklahoma. Sir, it's nice to see you this morning. Let's start out with, how will you vote on that continuing?
I'll certainly vote for it.
You'll vote for it? Because the Speaker says he's hopeful that the House and Senate are going to be able to work through this.
You know, I think the Speaker's right. I was really encouraged, actually, on Friday that both the President and the Speaker made a point of saying this shouldn't be used as a weapon and that it's something we ought to agree on. And so, look, obviously it's at the lower sequester number, but I'll certainly vote to extend funding, make sure that we don't risk government shutdown.
So, sir, over the weekend, Gene Sperling, who is the President's director of the National Economic Council, appeared on Meet the Press and talked about what the White House is willing to do, the work that is to undo the sequester spending cuts. Take a listen.
We will still be committed to trying to find Republicans and Democrats that will work on a bipartisan compromise to get rid of the sequester. And that's why the President was calling leadership on Friday. That's why he spent the Saturday afternoon calling Republican and Democratic senators who he thinks could be part of a caucus of common sense to help move our country forward.
Caucus of common sense. Congressman, at the end of the day, are you seeing the sequestration cuts mainly as a win for your party? Are people pleased that Speaker Boehner has dug in?
Look, I think the place for compromise is redistributing the cuts. We both agree on that this is not a sensible way to do it. If the compromise involves new revenue, then that's just simply not going to happen. We just had a huge tax increase with no spending cuts. Now the appropriate balance would be spending cuts with no revenue. Then let's go on and work on the larger issues down the road. But, you know, we could have solved this a long time ago if the President had gotten serious before literally the very last day.
Sir, I want to turn to this recent interview that you did with BuzzFeed and get your take on that, because in this piece you said that the Republican conferences and the conservatives are like amateur night at the Bijou. Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, I think sometimes we don't think far enough ahead in terms of an end game. I think that happened during the fiscal cliff. Look, if we hadn't made the deal we made, taxes would have gone up on every single American. The Bush tax cuts would have all been over. As it was, we saved 85% of them for 98% of the American people. I call that a win. Now, a lot of my colleagues would disagree. They somehow think that's a tax increase. It wasn't. It was making temporary tax cuts permanent for almost every American. So we need to be a little bit more far-sighted, but I think we're getting there.
When you talk about getting there, is it your impression, though, that revenue could make its way back into this conversation when we're talking about closing those tax loopholes and looking at larger reform for the rebirth of potentially a grand bargain?
Well, I think there is a potential for a grand bargain down the road. Not in the sequester. I don't think there's any chance for revenue here. I've been perfectly clear about that. But lots of things you can do if you do a tax code overhaul that will generate revenue by spurring faster economic growth. So I think there's a lot of things ahead, but to do those things, you're going to have to put serious entitlement reform on the table. The end game is to get the fiscal situation stabilized and the deficit under control and going down.
Sir, you may have seen Mitt Romney appeared over the weekend on Fox News with Chris Wallace, and I just want to play part of what he said about the election loss in his first TV interview since. Take a listen.
I still care, and I still believe that there are principles that we need to stand for. And I look at what's happening right now. I wish I were there. It kills me not to be there, not to be in the White House doing what needs to be done.
Do you think that mainly Republicans agreed to the fact that the sequester was coming because maybe, just maybe, you thought that a President Romney would be in place and things would be different right now under it?
Well, I wish Mitt Romney were here. I think one of his great strengths is to bring people of different points of view together. Did that as governor of Massachusetts, and he certainly, in his business and political career, always showed that he knew how to make a deal, and we need that deal-making expertise. But no, I think the sequester was literally, remember, President Obama's suggestion. Republicans went along with it with the idea that, well, sooner or later he'll sit down and renegotiate where these cuts are coming from. I think the President miscalculated and thought it meant sooner or later we would agree to revenues in this case, and that's just never been in the cards.
Congressman Tom Cole, sir, thanks for making time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Thomas.
Absolutely. All right, so